Episode 5 of Loki just dropped this past week, so let's talk about it. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I am your host Tommy B, and this is the Bailey Broadcast. Today we're going to be talking about episode 5 of Loki into, what was it called? The Journey into Mystery, I believe it was called. And, this was a good episode. It wasn't my favorite episode by any means. I kind of feel like, well, let's start off with the highlights, okay? We'll talk about the positive things first. I don't have that many negative things to say, but let's talk about the highlights of this episode. For me, Richard E. Grant as Classic Loki was phenomenal. Just all the time that we have our Loki spend with Classic Loki, Kid Loki, and the other Loki fella, even though he wasn't as big of significance as the first two, it was really fun to kind of hear their backstories and find out how they got, to the Void. Kid Loki killing Thor, which obviously isn't supposed to happen, kind of got him there. Classic Loki deceiving Thanos all the way up until Infinity War, where we think he dies. This classic version of Loki was able to do such a great projection of himself that it even, fooled the Mad Titan. So kind of cool to see, his journey, Classic Loki, and just where he would have ended up had he lived, and how sad his story would have been if he would have lived. He said, how he got just tired of being alone. He missed his brother. And, those relationships in the end really mattered to him after he had nothing. It was a very pivotal, conversation between all three of them and how he got here and what that place is. And, if there was any reason or chance, to escape. Which, we find out those other, versions of variants of Loki never really believed was possible, because Eliath, which is a huge, Easter egg in itself, to bring this, entity into the MCU was pretty cool. I mean, this, being or, entity, again, is something that dates way, way back into the Marvel Comics lore that ties once again to Kang the Conqueror. So once again, little tidbits in this episode that make us kind of affirm that belief that Kang is the bad guy. I'm probably about 80% positive he's going to be the one hiding in the castle. Again, there are spoilers today if you haven't watched the episode, so please go check it out and come back to us. So it was, a very interesting episode. I really loved all the Easter eggs. This episode by far had the most Easter eggs out of any episode out of any show we've had so far. From the Thanos helicopter, which I thought was great, and then the pan through the dirt, we see Mjolnir and Throg, who I did not expect to see. That's for sure. I don't have too much history with that character, but after doing some research, it was kind of funny that they added him in there. So, but yeah, I loved Classic Loki. I thought he was great. I loved Kid Loki and hearing how he got there. Even Alligator Loki was kind of funny, how Classic Loki was able to understand what he was saying, and it was pretty funny. And how, okay, kind of fast forward a little bit, when Classic Loki conjured up Asgard and kind of brought that illusion to life, it was probably my favorite scene out of the whole episode. The color schemes with the purples and greens, and just the way he did it, and then Loki seeing him, do that with Sylvie next to him, and realizing that they're more powerful than they realize, was a huge kind of turning point in my mind for Loki, and understanding what, he can do. But visually, it was just beautiful. And then, to have that kind of evil laugh in the face of death, and saying glorious purpose, it was just my favorite part of the whole episode. I can't say enough about Richard E. Grant. He's just a phenomenal actor. I've liked him for so long now, and to see him in this portrayal of Classic Loki, it was the perfect casting. I don't think anyone else would have done a better job. So unfortunate to see his demise, but the way he went out was pretty baller, I gotta say. So with that said, I just the two main things that kind of bother me about this episode, well, first of all, let's continue with the positives. The relationship building between Loki and Sylvie is still working for me. I do enjoy the chemistry between them and how they're kind of interacting with one another, even though it is kind of weird once again because he's falling in love with himself, and vice versa. The way that they're handling it is kind of cute in a way. This is the first time that they've both been in this position before. And the self-realization of Loki, about how he's let down everyone who's ever, loved him. He's betrayed his brother, his father. I think, him realizing that he didn't want to be that person anymore and telling Sylvie, I'm not that same person and I'm not going to, betray you or be that guy anymore, was a huge self-realization, and I think a turning point, for our Loki in this show. What this show has done a great job with, I think it has really kind of taken this Loki who we see at the end of Avengers, and who was really bad and cynical and just had a horrible view of the world and what he's entitled to, and making him the Loki that we get at the end of Infinity War before his death. The complete, the full circle of who he wants to be in this show now is really kind of taken it and fast forwarded it into this 6-episode show, and done a really great job, because now who knows what will happen after the finale this week. But I really loved how they were able to condense this character's journey into this show and take the Loki that we ended up loving in Infinity War and finally, making him that version in this show. So I love the self-realization, the chemistry between him and Sylvie, I think is great. When he's next to her and they're holding hands and they're trying to enchant Alioth, was really cool for him to, trust her and, kind of trust in himself that he can do that was pretty awesome. But okay, so my biggest thing about this show that's really starting to get to me now is how we have one episode left and we still have no real, we all have our, theories on who the villain is, but by now, especially this past week, we should have seen our villain. I feel like they're going to condense so much into this final episode that if it's not at least an hour long, we're not going to get all the answers that we deserve, right? We need to know why this villain is doing what he's doing. There's just too many questions that we have as an audience, and if they don't answer them all in the next episode, it's going to feel a bit of a letdown, right? And they could have helped themselves by, introducing the main villain, whether it's Kang or another version of Loki, in the 5th episode, and then, kind of stretched out, who he is, what he's doing, why he's doing it, why he created the Timekeepers to begin with, instead of trying to jam it all, I think, into this final episode. And don't get me wrong, I cannot wait for this final episode. I think it's going to probably be the best episode, but I just think it would have been easier on the team, behind the show, have they kind of, just, given us a little bit of information by this point. I think if they, like I said, if they don't give us all the answers that we want or the ending that they want, it's going to feel a little bit of a letdown. And I really haven't felt like that so far on this show. Episode 3 was a bit of a filler. Episode 4 was great. Episode 5, not that it was a filler episode, but there was just elements of it that they could have used better to maybe, for example, introduce the villain rather than the honestly, the stupid, I thought, fight scene between all the Lokis in the, hideout. It was very unnecessary in a lot of ways. They had been, kind of at advertising or marketing this President Loki in the commercials and trailers, for way before, the show even dropped. And for him to have a couple, one-liners, it was funny when Alligator Loki bit his arm off, but there was they really didn't need to have that scene, It was just kind of a, lackluster moment that I thought, done better, I guess. But, all in all, it was, fine. I definitely loved having Mobius show back up. I think we all kind of felt like after the post-credit scene last week that Mobius wasn't dead and he was going to show up. Maybe not on the same, planet as Loki was on, maybe on his own version with a bunch of Mobiuses. But, this works obviously a lot better. He comes and saves Sylvie, who ends up pruning herself. to get to where Loki's at. And just, the appreciation that Loki has for Mobius, and kind of, giving him a hug with most sincerity and saying, "Thank you, friend." It really kind of shows the growth with our main character. And I loved it. I can't wait to see, what Mobius does. If we do get it in this final episode, we'll see. But, how he's going back to take down the TVA, I thought was pretty, badass. I might have waited, for Loki and Sylvie to be done with, what they're doing, because he might need help taking down that TVA. I mean, he really doesn't have anyone on his side there except for B-15, who's locked up. So, hopefully, again, questions and answers that we need to see. But it was, again, I liked the episode. Visually, it was beautiful. I loved the Easter eggs. I loved Richard E. Grant and Kid Loki. I think the Kid Loki character, maybe we'll see him again in a Young Avengers, team up that seems to be in the works over at Marvel. And the conclusion, it gets you very hyped, right? Like, they enchant Alioth, they part the gates, so to speak, and you see the castle. Which, the castle, I think the Void Castle, I forget what it's called, but straight out of the comics, really, it should be King who's in there. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Again, I've really enjoyed this show, and I'm kind of bummed to see it come to an end, but hopefully, they deliver in this final episode. So, please leave your comments down below. If you enjoyed this episode, tell me what you thought. What was your favorite character or moment? And please hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't done it already. And now let's get lost in imagination. So for me, what was lost in imagination in this week's episode was all about acceptance. I think Loki accepting that he can't do this alone, that he doesn't want to be alone, was the main message of the episode. And it, rightfully so. I don't think anyone in this world, should walk through life alone. And, for our character to have that realization finally, especially after talking to classic Loki, who did end up alone until he ended up, in the void, was a huge, eye-opener moment. And I think, whether you get to moments like that make you realize that you need to change and accept that, no one deserves to be alone. As long as you get that point and you accept that, you shouldn't go through life alone, then, you've made progress. And reaching out and, asking people for help or whatever it may be, just to get together, have a drink, go to brunch, whatever. I mean, it's important in life. We need that, fulfillment, to feel just whole. So I loved the message, and once again, this episode and this show does a great job at looking at oneself. So thank you so much for stopping by, and we'll see you next time on the Bailey Broadcast. Take care, guys.